we come from. The truth is an irony, just like animal farm. Justice mean inequity, so who go say the truth? Who go say the truth? Christian can say silence, Islamic leaders silence, kings and queens silence, traditional leaders silence. So who go say the truth? We are the workers of composite call. Now by area, why no better? We are the workers of composite call. One guy's out here, why no better? Who go say the truth? Who go say the truth? Oh, you need it to see what I see so. Now your friend on an iron come at them. Only papi obeka nasembia. So I want one over you. Everybody was afraid. And when Tinanan to my cottage again, once my boy dumping one another. But who go tell the truth? Nanai or say me. Nanso bien person beka wasam because everybody is afraid. Anya safwe muayini akukudro fonyina dalima. Enti who go say the truth? Obiaja konson so to grow your man sa to me bia ka kobrafo. Efo anyina ye. Efo wanyina ye. Na so kutrata down na so bidia ba ko wai no keke. Afene fo be mane mo pia fo efo ne cross on my mo. Anya safwe mo ayini. Akukudro fo nyina dalima. Enti who go say the truth? Abaya di bote chino. Yedi bi bebo nyande bi. Kachisa would your mouth pipinuma. Would your mind never shine my preference? But who go tell the truth? TUC silence. Even journalists silence. So then who go say the truth? Right is right, wrong is wrong, no matter how you justify. You say you wanna get rid of corruption, someone want to help you, now the person become your target. Jobless no they mean senseless, poverty no they mean useless. One day, them go resist.
A very good evening to you wherever you are. It's always my pleasure to welcome you to MyView Show, coming to you live on today's Ghana News TV. As usual, this is our socio-political program where we look at issues all around us and then together we share our views and take the views of our guests. Fighting has erupted in the Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC. This fight is a bit complex, it's multifaceted. The causes are rooted in both historical and contemporary issues. What are the main programs? What are the issues that the fight in DRC predates even the independence of Ghana? What can we do? Will this fight affect the entire African continent? the entire world, or the immediate countries that surround DRC Congo? That is the topic we are going to discuss this evening, and I'll take a short break. When I come back, I have a security expert who will share his knowledge and concerns about the fight, its effect and impact on Africa and beyond. Stay tuned. So welcome back. As I did indicate, I want to look at the ramification of the war in Congo DRC and its impact on Africa. And it's my pleasure to have this evening as our guest, Mr. Fidel Amakye Owusu, who is the CEO of DevSec Analytics Africa Limited. That's a security and a risk consultancy based in Accra, Ghana. And it's our pleasure to welcome him to the show to share his experience and expectations resulting from the war in DRC Congo. Mr. Owusu, you are most welcome.
Thank you, sir, for having me.
Great. It's a great pleasure to have you this evening. And we want to look at what is happening in Congo DRC and whether it has any impact on the entire African continent or the immediate countries and the world at large. So probably just, can you give us an overview of this ongoing conflict in DRC and what are probably the primary causes of it?
Thank you very much for this opportunity on your fantastic platform. Firstly, we have to note that Congo is rightly located in the heart of Africa, in the middle of Africa. And so if we're moving from Southern Africa to Northern Africa, you will use Congo. If we're moving from West Africa to East Africa, you are likely to use Congo. And if you were moving from the Horn of Africa to Central Africa, Congo is right there. Because of that, Congo belongs to 3 regional economic communities, RECs, in Africa. And it's the only country that belongs to 3 regional economic communities. So it belongs to the Central African Economic Community of Central African States, the East African Community, and then the Southern African Development Community. So because of its location, it's really matters to all these regions. Again, the country is very huge. And because of that, it has 9 neighbors. No other country in Africa has 9 neighbors. So we are talking about Republic of Congo, you are talking about Central African Republic, South Sudan, Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, Tanzania, Zambia, and Angola. All these 9 countries sharing boundaries with the Republic of or Democratic Republic of Congo. So this also means that it's whatever happens in this country can really affect any of these states. And per what you know, in the Berlin Conference of 1884-1885, where the Europeans put Africa on the table like a piece of cake and divided it without any African representation. This has meant that borders have cut through ethnicities. So if you came to Ghana, you realize that we have the Ewe nation in Ghana, in Togo, and in Benin. And even according to some sources, we still have the Ewe community in eastern Nigeria.
Yeah.
That is what happens or happened across Africa. And in the case of Congo, you find ethnicities living in any of these 9 countries and at the same time in Congo. And that means that whatever that happens in DRC affects multiple communities in the multiple regions. So that is important. Now, another factor is this. The country is also well resourced or endowed in terms of natural resources. So the computer that I am using currently has an element we call coltan, and that mineral is used in manufacturing computer parts, phones, and things like that. And this coltan is abundantly available in the DRC. Okay. Again, we have cobalt. Cobalt is used in the EV, electric vehicle industry, and other battery technology. And also, Congo has about 50% of cobalt deposits, discovered cobalt deposit. Then you talk of lithium, what we call the white gold. The country has it in abundance. Then gold, oil. I mean, everything you can think of, Congo has it. I mean, if you're talking about even hydroelectric potential, the Congo River, if you observe the map of Africa, you realize that the Congo River goes through, and its tributaries go through the entire country of the DRC. That is very rich. The land, the timber, and things like that. Now, this has meant that that country attracts a lot of interest in Africa and beyond. The Israelis are interested, the Americans are interested, the Chinese are interested. And so are many other African countries that are also interested in the resources of the country. Then another factor is the history of the country.
Yeah.
Unlike other countries in Africa where colonialism was more formal and brought in some kind of exploitative development, that's what I put it, because then if you look at Ghana, most of our railway system and other infrastructure were built to enhance exploitation during colonialism. So, but at the end of the day, when they left, some of these things were left behind. But in the case of Congo, it was given in 1884, 1885 in Berlin. They gave Congo as a prize to the Belgian king. So instead of giving the country to, or sharing the country and giving it to the state of Belgium, they rather gave it to the king, King Leopold, as a prize. Okay. You know, so I mean, as a prize. So at the end of the day, he owned it and exploited it massively. People were killed. The exploitation was barbaric and massive. Now that history has lingered on to this day. And so that country is woefully underdeveloped. And the development that you see in Kinshasa is not what we see in the interior. So that is also something that we have to also note as this discussion goes on.
It goes on. Seriously, because we'll get to it. We see that very often where we have a continuous fight or war going on, the country or those countries usually have a lot of resources. And from hindsight, it looks as if the developed world with a higher interest in such minerals seems to always be fueling those conflicts. So as the conflicts go on, they go in there in an attempt to bring about peace, but take advantage and steal those ones. But we will come back to it. We have already hit on those ones. We want to look at you have already talked about the colonial and the post-independence politics, and that could have influenced the conflict in the DRC. Let's look at it. What other roles, apart from this division that they did on the table, and even worse of it all, giving Congo as a gift to the king, but not as a colonial country to the whole country of Belgium? Could there be some foreign powers or multinational companies fueling the conflict in this country?
Yeah, thank you very much for this question. For the sake of security, we do not engage in speculation.
Sure.
Because sometimes I've heard a lot of narratives. I've heard people accuse certain companies and multinationals for fueling this conflict. But there are certain things that we know, and some of which include interstate friction between Rwanda and the DRC. Now, one thing about this is that you go back to the 19th century division of Africa. What that means is that over the time, many groups have claimed different territories in the region for themselves. One will argue that, well, before colonialism, we used to be here, or we used to have this place under our control. Colonialism stopped it, and so we are coming back for it. Another group will come in and say, well, you don't belong here, and things like that. And this contestation has dragged on to this day.
Okay.
Now, what's the case with Rwanda? Rwanda is a country that is under the control of minority Tutsi ethnicity. Now, this means that after the 1994 genocide, the Tutsis took control of a country that has majority Hutu group. Now, when this happened, some Hutu who were not very much in line with this development left the country and formed a rebel group against Rwanda. Now, in the case of the DRC, we also have Tutsis that claim to come from DRC and who also formed a rebel group against the DRC. Over the years, Rwanda has come to back this Tutsi group because Rwanda, as I've told you, is controlled by the Tutsi. And the Hutu group is also backed by the DRC against Rwanda. So there's a proxy war actually happening in the what we call the Great Lakes region, because the country where we find the DRC, Uganda, Tanzania, and Rwanda is also called the region is also called the Great Lakes region, because we have a lot of lakes in the region: Lake Kivu, Lake Albert, and other lakes in the region, Tanganyika and others. So this complex region has had this conflict because of the overlapping ethnic loyalties and this proxy war. Now, in the past half decade, the M23, the Tutsi-led M23, has been very aggressive in coming back to Eastern DRC to take the city of Goma. And it is so clear that Rwanda is backing the M23. And when you interact with Rwanda, there's something we call strategic ambiguity, where they neither say yes or no, but they are backing it. Recently, President Kagame of Rwanda was asked if his forces were indeed in the DRC. He said he did not know. And that means they were there, because then he's the commander-in-chief, and we know how powerful he is in his country. So if he says he doesn't know where his forces are, that is not very intelligent. I mean, we all know that they were there, or they are still there. And his forces have backed these rebels to make a lot of advances. Currently, they've captured the principal city of North Kivu, known as Goma, and just yesterday, they took Bukavu, another principal city of South Kivu. And by this, they have really created, or they are now in control of an expansive territory and are ready to march on to Kinshasa, the capital of the DRC. That is going to be very complicated with time.
That is. I never saw it coming this way, and I thought it was just a very simple thing, confined to some 2 or 3 cities, and thereafter we would have we could have watered it down. But if this is the move that they are moving towards the capital, then it means that very soon we'll have issues with refugees and all that. But not only the capital. This conflict in particular, has it got security and stability impact on the neighboring countries like Uganda, Burundi, and all that?
So, as I've mentioned, firstly, Rwanda is the main country that is directly affected. Then we have Uganda. Uganda is the richest and the largest landlord country in the region in terms of GDP.
Okay.
And with that, it also has ethnic groups that overflow from its territory into DRC. Just yesterday, a general of Uganda, who is also the son of President Yoweri Museveni, has threatened to occupy another city in Eastern DRC. But take note that Uganda is an ally or is allied with Rwanda for obvious reasons, because Paul Kagame and Museveni used to be working together as guerrilla fighters against their respective governments before they took power. So even though in recent past they've had some misunderstandings, they are effectively allies. But then let's talk about South Africa. In this conflict, we've heard about South Africa. South Africa does not share direct border with the DRC, but it has its forces in the DRC. Why? The why is that the DRC is a member state of the Southern Africa Development Community. So by virtue of that, South Africa has the right to intervene in any conflict situation in the country. And so even though some people have felt that South Africa does not need to be there, that is not very good to say, because then it's just like saying Nigeria or Ghana was not supposed to be in Liberia in the 90s and the 80s because they do not share direct border with Liberia. No, DRC belongs to the regional bloc, and the regional bloc has the responsibility to ensure stability in the country. And so that is how come South Africa is contributing forces. But the other thing is that because of these forces, Rwanda and South Africa are now at loggerheads, or there is tension between Rwanda and South Africa. Rwanda believes that South Africa is threatening its existence by stationing forces in Eastern DRC. But South Africa is also saying that, well, we have not invaded Rwanda. We are seeking stability in Eastern DRC. So if it's making you uncomfortable, we do not care about it. And one thing is that South Africa has lost some forces in the course of this conflict. And so some people believe that it has committed so much lives and resources for it to withdraw from the DRC.
Okay.
Some few days ago, it sent new reinforcement or new forces to the country through the south. And this is really complicating the conflict. We had the first Congo war and the second Congo war that drew several countries, including Israel. And now it looks like we are going to have a third Congo war from all indications.
Yeah. Let me take you a step backwards, because you mentioned M23 and then all that. What it simply means is that we have several armed groups operating within the DRC. I don't know if you are in a position to explain the motivation for some of these key groups, especially the M23, the ADF, we have the FDLR and all that. Do you have the motivation?
Yeah. So whenever resources are at stake, conflicts seem to be protracted because there is a price. Every war has spoils. And if there is a spoils of war, then the war is likely to continue until someone gets it. So the presence of resources will make sure that this is prolonged. But you mentioned some forces, and I will take my time to explain each and every one of them, the forces you mentioned.
Yeah.
Now, M23, I've already explained.
Yeah.
The AFRDC is the Hutu group that is backed by the DRC against Rwanda. And Rwanda says that if that group, then it means.
Can you take it again?
Yes, the AFDRC, it is in French. Some people put the acronym in French, some put it in English. So depending on where you put it. Yeah. Now that group is a Hutu-dominated group that is against Rwanda, and that is backed by the DRC. And as I mentioned, there is a proxy war between Rwanda and the DRC in the region. So Rwanda backs M23, the DRC backs the AFRDRC. Now the ADF is the interesting one. The ADF, that is Allied Defense Forces, came from Uganda. And because they could not be contained in Uganda, had to cross and come to the DRC. Now, currently, that group has sworn allegiance to ISIS. So currently, the name of ADF is ISCAP or ISCAP, which means Islamic State Central African Province. And they are engaged in a lot of atrocities. But that is not all. We also have the Lendu Hima clashes, two ethnicities fighting over who has the right to land and traditional political office. And just some few days ago, 51 people were killed in that inter-ethnic clashes. It is because of these inter-ethnic clashes that Uganda is threatening to invade the Ituri province, which is also close to North Kivu.
Okay.
So these are the different forces. And then we have several other groups that are, in fact, the M23 is actually part of an alliance of rebels, just that it is the most powerful amongst them. That's why we hear the M23 most often. But there are other rebel groups that fights along with them.
We still have a lot of information to get out of you, but someone has just triggered me to ask this question. The regional peacekeeping efforts or international interventions, how effective has it been in combating or in containing this violence?
Please repeat that.
I'm asking the regional peacekeeping efforts.
Okay.
Regional peacekeeping efforts or international interventions effective in containing the violence?
Okay, so we explained that the country itself belongs to 3 regional blocks.
Yeah.
Apart from African Union, it belongs to 3 regional blocks. Now, which means that the EAC, which is the East African Community, and the interesting thing is that the DRC joined the EAC 2 years ago in 2022. But it had been a member of the SADC for over 20 years because it joined in the late 90s. Now, the question is, where is the loyalty? And in 2023, Kenya, for the first time, contributed forces to Eastern DRC with other South Sudan and others. After 12 months or even less, Kinshasa, that is the authorities in DRC, did not or were not satisfied with the performance of that force. And so the mandate ended. And the Southern African Development Community came in as a substitute. So the issue is that because of the conflict, even between and among the regional groups, there is tension. And so in recent times, the EAC has said that, well, the conflict is in Eastern DRC, and so it affects it more than it affects the SADC. So the SADC should stay off. But the SADC said, well, we are been with this DRC thing for a longer period than you have done. They just joined you 2 years ago. They have been with that for decades. And so by virtue of that, we have more rights than you do have. And this continues. And one thing that we should note is that South Africa is a mining economy.
Yeah.
And so South Africa also see itself to be standing to gain from this, because if there's stability, then it has more experience and investment to come in the DRC and mine the resources, albeit in a more procedural way or in a more formal way. So then with so much commitment, South Africa is not willing to move away. And so this brings some clash between the EAC and the SADC. And the last joint summit that was held in Harare, no solid communication came out because the two groups do not agree. For the Economic Community of Central African States, it is very weak. In fact, without the DRC, that bloc is very weak because the countries that we find over there are Chad. Chad itself has a lot of problems. They talk of Cameroon. Cameroon is facing Ambazonia, a separatist group trying to break away from the country. Then you talk of Gabon. Gabon just had a coup, and so it is ruled by the military. Then you come to talk of Equatorial Guinea. Equatorial Guinea has the longest ruling president on the continent, and nothing is coming from there. Then you talk of Republic of Congo, another country with one of the longest rulers, rulers that have stayed for so long. And then you come to talk about Central African Republic, the poorest country on the continent. So for them, we don't even talk about them. So we just talk about the EAC and the SADC, who are also in disagreement. This means that when you go to African Union, the discussion is also going to be affected, because they will take the differences. The two blocks will take the differences to Ethiopia, the largest forum, to trash things out. And I mean, it doesn't augur well. And the just ended African Union summit, many observers saw how the conflict in the DRC was playing out even in the election of leaders for the union.
The union. Yeah. So at this stage, what more can be done to stabilize the situation from where you sit?
In fact, the first thing is ceasefire. When a conflict is raging or it's ongoing, it's very difficult to come up with something solid, because every day things happen. In fact, children are being raped as I speak.
Yeah.
People are dying. Refugee camps are being attacked. I mean, there is a risk of a dangerous epidemic, because Ebola has already happened in the in Uganda, neighboring Uganda. And Uganda has stability, so it can handle it. What if it comes to Eastern DRC? What will happen? So we need ceasefire. And after the ceasefire, any other issue can be discussed. But currently, with the rebels taking Bukavu and other surrounding cities and taking resource areas and threatening to march onto Kinshasa, it is very difficult to sit here and engage in speculations and wishes.
But where does the AU stand in all this? Because you've just spoken about how the conflict played out in the recent elections at the AU summit. What is the significance of the AU if it cannot help to bring stability to its own member states?
Okay, so AU is a forum for African states. So individual African states make up the AU. AU is not anything outside Africa. It's a group of, countries, the 54 sovereign states coming together to, and in this case, even Western Sahara is part of 55, coming together to discuss issues of common interest. Now, when the division, that is why, in fact, let's go into this. In 1963, when the AU was being created,
okay,
it was not going to be easy, because a group of people thought that Africa should unite there and then. Others thought that we should be gradual. So people like Nkrumah said, no, Africa should have one high command military. We should have a currency, a flag, one anthem, a federal system, one market, and all that instantly, because it was possible. Others said that no, we are too young. Some people were not independent, others were struggling, others were newly independent and things like that. So let's be gradual. Now this gradualist won the day. So Kwame Nkrumah in 1963, May 1963, was in Ethiopia disappointed, because that was not what he wanted for Africa. Subsequently, it came to light that, well, if we wanted to unite as a continent, we must start at the regional levels. So we should form regional economic communities. So ECOWAS, East African Community, ECAS, SADC, AMU, and others were created. IGAD or IGAD in the Horn of Africa were all created to ensure that we have what we call procedural or gradual or incremental steps towards unity.
Okay.
But at the end of the day, nothing much is happening. I mean, there are some successes chalked, some gains have been made, but by and large, it's nothing is happening. And so, if the crisis is not resolved at the regional level, it is very difficult to do so at the continental level, where the countries are so many. So until we revamp and take the regional economic community seriously, the continental level will continue to be weak.
But even that, if you look at the case of this DRC Congo, where it belongs to 3 different regional blocks, now you have already raised the question of loyalty, and even the regional blocks, how have they been able to play their role in trying to bring down this conflict? In any case, almost all the other neighboring countries have one interest or the other in this conflict.
Yeah. So that is what we are talking about. Let's talk about even the personalities involved, the individual level of analysis.
Okay.
The man called Paul Kagame. Paul Kagame has been in office since the late 90s. In fact, he started as a defense minister, vice president, and later president. And he's a very powerful man. Now, very few leaders in the region can stand before him and rebuke him. Very few people. And so that towering figure, and he's also seen as a kind of a messianic leader, somebody who came to save the day. At the time when Europeans were abandoning Rwanda, his rebel forces came in to stop the massacre and bring stability. So that kind of towering figure that he has makes the conflict even difficult to resolve, because there is this personality clash between himself and Felix Tshisekedi of the DRC. At one point, Tshisekedi said, well, I don't want to see him. I can't sit down with him to talk. In another, at another time, Paul Kagame was being difficult as well. And when Angola stepped in to mediate the crisis, it didn't end anywhere. And currently, the Angolan leader has been made AU chairman. So maybe he's going to have some relative leverage to bring them back to the table for some resolution. Sorry.
No problem. It's good having you. We'll just have the opportunity to take a cup of water, and then we'll take messages from our viewers and followers. And when we come back, we'll look at the involvement of the UN and other peace building efforts in curbing the fight in DRC Congo. So if you have just joined us, as usual, this is MyView Show coming to you live on today's Ghana News TV. We are looking at the ramification of the war in Congo DRC and its impact on Africa. So far, we have had a very good discussion looking at the genesis of the war and where we are today. The interest of the neighboring countries and even the international community all contributes to the instability. Whatever be the case, we need peace in DRC Congo. We need peace in the entire African continent. Whilst we take the messages from our followers, we will bring back our experts so that we can look at the efforts of the United Nations, African Union, and all that. By any case, these are the first solution to the issue of the fight lies right with the people themselves. They have to initiate it, and then the outsiders can come in and support. So stay tuned, and we take the messages from our followers, and right afterwards, we'll look at the peace building and future of the DRC Congo. A very good evening to you wherever you are. NDC Diaspora Union, wow, fantastic guy in the show, watching from Amsterdam, Holland. We are always grateful, NDC Union. Boache says, good evening, Dr. Jerome and your team. I really like your show because of the guests you always bring on board to give us education, watching and listening from Achem Heman. Asampahini, we are grateful. Bafi says, I'm watching from Makusenia Somonia. Please kindly ask him what triggered the current conflict in DC and DR Congo. Sure, I would ask him. I would ask him what triggered the current conflict and what can be done about it. Jaframa TV, thank you for carrying our feet. Good evening, watching from Rara in the Oti region. Please, which foreign powers are supporting the rebels in Congo DRC? That, my guest rightly said that we do not have to engage in speculations until you are sure you don't mention names, but we will look at it when we come back after this. Pekuyevu says, wow, what a sharp guy, watching attentively from Suhum, the eastern region of Ghana. We are grateful, Kweku. Nanata Fremu, greetings from totally northern and Sakina information listeners. We are grateful. This is very deep, this is very deep discussion, and we're grateful that you are carrying our feet for people there. Kim, Bob says, I'm watching from Paris, France. Ghana is far in the west of Africa. How is the conflict going to affect Ghana and the West Africa? Yeah, conflict definitely has its own repercussions, so we'll look at it. Yeah, Tofik says, good evening from both of you, CS. My question is, what is AU doing on this conflict? Well, he has already dealt with the AU issue, but we will go further and see, apart from AU, what other regional blocks play a very key role. Tofik, once again, is Tofik from Mönchengladbach. Tofik, we are very grateful that you are part of the show. Zongo Caucus coordinator. Lady Mal too says, I'm really enjoying the show, watching on Switch from St. Petersburg, Russia. We are grateful, Lady Mal. Sakwa family says, wow, what a great show and good performance from Mr. Fidel Amakye. Did he get his name from the great Cuban leader? Oh, watching from Jimafonia Kofode. Yeah, who asked him? Maybe he's called Fidel Castro. Wonderful, Sakwa. Oh, Umar Dennis. Oh, good evening, Vice. Good evening, CS. Watching you live from the beautiful city of Bielefeld. We're very grateful, Vice, that you are part of the show. Kwesi Ntian says, in all of this, what is the African Union doing to save lives and properties? Watching from Anglo Town in Koforidua. Yeah, definitely, we'll have to look at it. He has already spoken about the impact of African Union, but we'll look at it. We'll look at the issue of refugees. We'll look at the issue of humanitarian impact and all that. Oh, Vice says, kudos to you and your wonderful guest. Oh, Chief Umar, we are grateful for your compliments. Mavis Boateng, seated and getting my education from the show, watching on YouTube from Lisbon, Portugal. Mavis, we are grateful. Patience Daco. Oh, it's been a while. Patience, I hope you're doing well. Watching from Hamburg, Germany. Yeah, Ghana in fear. Please, so in all this, how can peace be restored to DRC? Watching from Bosunso in the Pantiakwa South District. We will ask. There is always a solution to every problem. So pray that we'll find solution to this disturbing issue. Nyame says, I can imagine their suffering. Nkonta has been in curfew for the past 8 months and all our businesses has collapsed. Greetings from Nkonta in the Oti region. We continue to pray for peace in Nkonta. Seriously, we really need peace to prevail there. So that has been a discussion on today's Ghana News TV, looking at the conflict in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And I am very grateful that I have no other person but Mr. Amakye Owusu, who is the CEO of DevSec Analytics African Limited, a security and a risk consultancy firm in Accra. And he's given us a lot of information on what is going on up there. Frema Oye says, watching from Manchenia T is not complete. But all the same, so I will bring back my guest and then we look at somebody had several questions came up about the involvement of AU left and right, AU left and right, AU left and right. And looking at the countries, the questions about the economic impact on the countries surrounding where the conflict is really taking place. Can you just briefly, are there any economic impacts?
Yeah, so conflicts are not cheap. They're expensive because then it stops all economic activities. It disrupts supply chain. It dislodges people from their daily activities. And so the immediate economy is affected massively. And as people become internally displaced, it means that they are not able to engage in economic activities. And that region is really densely populated. And with the conflict, it means the economies of the local people are affected. But those in Uganda and Rwanda are not affected much, even though they seem to, in one way or the other, influence the conflict. Because it's not happening on their soil, they are not affected as much as the people of Eastern DRC. So that is the economy of it in the short term. But in the long term, as this conflict drags, and the UN Secretary General has warned about a total war in the Great Lakes region. And when that happens, then it is going to have more economic ramifications that is likely to be negative on multiple countries. Yeah.
Yeah, someone wanted to find out about the involvement of the United Nations in addressing this conflict. What have they done so far? And do you think that what they have done or what they are doing is enough to bring this conflict to an end?
Yeah, so most of the regional forces initially were backed by the UN. And the UN also has humanitarian services going on in the region for a long time. Rehabilitation of people who have been raped, people who have been maimed, and things like that. Setting up of refugee camps or camps for internally displaced people and all that. But in the end, it is not about what you do while the conflict is happening. It is about stopping the conflict so that you don't have to do what you are doing, because then the people need long-term stability in order to survive. And so that is very important. Now, the issue is that often conflicts in Africa are forgotten. Look at Sudan. When Sudan started, everywhere, you saw it on the headlines, BBC, Al Jazeera, CNN, everywhere. But after some time, Sudan is a forgotten war. And a lot of atrocities are happening. In fact, yesterday, a refugee camp was attacked by the RSF in Sudan. But who talked about it? It was just somewhere on the footnote of the news. And so the DRC conflict, some people, I've met Europeans who would say, well, for the DRC, it has been there for a long time. So it means like a kind of fatigue. People have developed fatigue for that conflict. That, well, that's and sometimes it's even you hear racial slurs like, oh, the Africans, let allow them to do what they want to do for themselves. I mean, to themselves and all that. That is how people say it. So it is not prioritized. It is not prioritized. In fact, before Gaza, the atrocities in Gaza is like Eastern DRC is Gaza, because then you find mass graves, you find people rape, you find all kinds of things. People get killed in that region, and people just walk away after doing that without accountability or being held responsible. So that is very important, that one, the international community is not going to prioritize this conflict, and so Africans, we must prioritize it. One of the questions asked that Ghana is way off in West Africa. What is our problem with a conflict in the DRC? When I was in JHS, or at the time it was JSS, Junior Secondary School, I had a friend who used to live around Bubuashi, so I used to go there, and I met someone who came from Congo. In fact, according to him, he was in Kinshasa when this Kabila match happened, and then he had to run, and he landed in Ghana. Now, if that person happens to be a criminal, a Ghanaian is affected, or Ghana is affected, even though Ghana is far away from the DRC. Okay, so in fact, as long as we all live in the same continent, whatever happens anywhere has the propensity to get to you. When Bin Laden hit World Trade Center in September 11, people thought this is far away. Americans have got their war, let them fight it. Today, the epicenter of global terrorism is in the Sahel, in Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso. And where is Burkina Faso? On the northern regions of Ghana. Yes, and the news is that some Ghanaians are fighting with militants against the military in Burkina Faso. That is the news, the current news. Yeah. And so, I mean, it is not about where Ghana is located, and no, it is about the thing that's happening to Africans, and we must all be concerned. In fact, the first country to contribute forces to Congo in the 1960s was Ghana. And Kwame Nkrumah argued that out in the UN. So, as a country, we have been that concerned about whatever happened to our fellow African countries. And so we are not isolationists like some people are behaving these days.
Because before we look at the processes and the peace organizations and all that, can we get a pictorial view of refugee flow and impact as a result of this war?
Yeah. So the issue is that obviously the DRC guys are not going to, or people in DRC are not going to cross to Rwanda. But Uganda, I've heard that some people try to move to the interior region onto Uganda or neighboring states, neighboring provinces. So it is more of internal displacement than international displacement or refugees crossing to other countries. It's more about, because as I mentioned, DRC is a very huge country, huge, and it's the second largest country in Africa, actually, apart from Algeria, and it has the largest forest in Africa too, rainforest in Africa. So if you're talking about the Amazon forest, the second one should be the forest in the DRC. So it's very important to even global, the stability of climate change or the climate, international climate and all that. So it's a country that people should not ignore, So with the displacement, it is more internal displacement than, people crossing to to become refugees in other countries. Yeah.
Looking at this war that probably predated the independence of Ghana and all that till now, do you see any possible solutions that could lead to lasting peace in DRC?
So the war did not predate the independence of Ghana. I've heard people say that it's not true.
Okay.
It actually Ghana was 67, and the war actually happened in the 60s because of disagreement, internal disagreement, ideological influence from the Cold War. Okay. So what happened was this. The DRC gained independence in 1960. When it gained independence, the prime minister was Patrice Lumumba. He was a leftist, someone who believed in socialism. Then they had a president called Joseph Kasavubu, and he believed in capitalism. Now, they ran a parliamentary system where the prime minister was the head of government and they had a ceremonial president. But because Belgium was a Western country, it backed Kasavubu against Patrice Lumumba, because the West thought that Patrice Lumumba was going to side with the Soviets. And in those days, the Western countries were not in a position to allow the Soviets to have a foothold in Africa. And so that led to the first tension between groups in Congo, that is the Katanga region and the capital, and which ultimately led to the killing of Patrice Lumumba. So these are the factors from the historical point of view, post-independence factors. But the pre-independence factors were mostly poverty and underdevelopment, lack of education and things like that. But the post-independence conflict was influenced by the Cold War. And when Patrice Lumumba was killed, eventually Mobutu Sese Seko, who eventually became richer than the country, very, very, very ridiculous, was put there by the West, and he stayed there till the 1990s when Laurent Kabila marched on to Kinshasa, and then he had to flee from the country. Yeah.
Yeah, I like the statement you just made. He was put there by the West. It means that the interest of the West seems to have a greater impact on whatever happens on our continent. And this fight...
Yeah. So...
Okay.
Yeah, so the Cold War politics, you would blame the West, but the Soviets were also doing similar things in Ethiopia. Haile Selassie was overthrown by a military backed by the Soviets. So the Soviets were not Westerners, they were also from the East, but they also backed another military to overthrow Haile Selassie, and he was eventually he died, whether he was murdered or what, he eventually died. And so this was happening across the continent. The Cold War really affected Africa. Maybe another time we can have a discussion on the Cold War alone, because it's a whole chunk. Many of the problems we face currently result from the Cold War. Many. And so that is very important to note, sir.
Good. Let's now take a step forward towards peace building before we look at the impact on global security. For peace to be achieved in DRC, I don't know, how do you see the impact or the contribution of the neighboring countries involved in this whole process? How can they all contribute to bring peace?
Yes, I believe I mentioned this earlier that it's about interest. Now, Rwanda want assurances that it is going to be safe. And in fact, by all standards, Rwanda has benefited from this conflict because then resources extraction and Rwanda doesn't have much coltan mines, but it produces a lot of coltan, and that is suspicious because then the supply line between through Lake Kivu links Rwanda and the Eastern DRC. And the thing is that Rwanda is suspected to be mining resources from DRC and then bringing it back to Rwanda and exporting it. You see, now all these things means that if Rwanda wants legitimate investment in the Eastern DRC, that should be discussed. You know, but where the conflict is happening and somebody benefiting from it, it becomes complex. So many or different countries have different interests. And I think that for peace to prevail, countries should be approached individually. There should not be any blanket or blanket approach to resolving the crisis. We should have specifics. Rwanda wants that. Uganda, that's what Uganda wants. Let's sit down. Let's see the way forward with it. And I think that will solve the crisis. And when, in fact, if Rwanda gains much from the DRC than it would gain in peacetime, then it will be difficult for Rwanda to sit around the table because there is a better alternative to peace. You see? So that is always these indicators always complicate conflict and prolongs it eventually. Yeah.
Now we are moving further to look at the impact of the DRC conflict on the global security. You are the security expert. In your own opinion, how does this instability in DRC impact global security, particularly with regard to illegal arms trade and the exploitation of our natural resources?
Yeah. So way back, I wrote a piece and I was talking about arms race in Africa. And I was mentioning some countries. I mentioned Ethiopia, I mentioned Rwanda, and I mentioned the DRC. But the danger is with DRC and Rwanda. These are neighboring states engaged in proxy war and engaged in armed race. Now, with the arms race, it means they are vertically, if you say vertically, that a country is increasing its arms stockpile. And these countries are doing that. The DRC has procured armed drones from China. And it has also brought in mercenaries. It has really equipped its military, like in recent years. It has been doing that. On the Rwanda side, Rwanda has procured Turkish drones and armed drones. So what it means is that if there is any direct clashes between these two countries, it could be very devastating because the human cost could be lowered in terms of those operating arms.
Yeah, arms.
If you sit in the comfort of your room and you can control armed drones to go as far as Kinshasa to bomb, you kill so many people at a lower risk to yourself. And so that can prolong this conflict. And recently, if you've listened to Paul Kagame, he keeps saying he will spit in the faces of his enemies. He will do this. He knows what he's saying. He's not joking. He is armed. And he has what it takes to enforce what he's saying. And the DRC itself has not been quiet. In the last few days, the Rwanda has accused the DRC of planning something big. And I don't doubt that. Because the DRC has also procured some weapons. As to whether they could be more professional, their armed forces can be more professional than that of Rwanda, that's another thing. Because from what we know, after the genocide, Paul Kagame has built a security state. Rwanda is currently in a position where Israel is in the Middle East. That is the comparison I try to draw. You know, if you look at the map of Israel, it's a very tiny country.
Yeah.
But it's able to hold all those big countries in check. That is what Rwanda is doing. That is what Rwanda is doing. And I don't doubt that.
That's interesting. Our time is fast run. But one more question. Just one. What message should the international community take away from this ongoing situation in the DRC? Because when it comes to addressing conflicts in Africa and beyond.
Okay. Okay, so the international community should note that, look, let me go back to this. You know, the first atomic bombs that was used in 1945, Hiroshima, Nagasaki.
Yeah.
The fuel for that atomic bomb, the uranium, majority of it came from Lumumbashi in DRC at that time. So DRC has been very significant to international community and international security. That bomb that was dropped on the Japanese and by the US, the fuel came from Lumumbashi at that time. So the DRC occupies a very sensitive area. In international peace and security, the minerals that the Silicon Valley needs to produce all this technological equipment and all that are there. And so the stability of the DRC could allow a formal exploitation of these resources for the benefit of all. The opposite is that we leave it as a dangerous zone full of conflict, and then in the end it splashes on everyone's faces, because then when things happen, often some people may benefit, but in the long term, war or wars do not benefit anybody. There was a question about my name too. I don't know if I have to explain.
Yeah. Whether you are related to Fidel, you got it from
It was
Fidel.
I didn't want to leave that because for obvious reasons. Because you know that is true. I was named after him. My father was part of the 1980s. He supported the revolution so he was a PNDC member, and at the time Cuba was supporting us tremendously. And so when I was born in the 80s, he decided to name me after Fidel Castro. So that is the reason for yeah. So I was literally named after Fidel Castro. Yes,
that's wonderful.
So that is, and so as I'm saying, the conflict should be taken seriously because it can affect anybody, anywhere beyond Africa.
Yes, Mr. Amakye, I think our time has finally run out. All the same, we have focused on the war in DRC today. I believe that in Ghana as a whole, we also have a very tragic situation which is happening up north in the Boko enclave. I believe that we have to make time and then look at the issue of tribal conflicts in Ghana as a whole and then the way forward. Because I believe strongly if we start holding discussions on these issues and giving out solutions or possible solutions that could stop and prevent subsequent ones, I believe it will do us a lot of good. But briefly, do you think that we can find a solution? Because the Boko conflict, for instance, since 2000, it has been ringing on. Well, some of us got to know about it around 2000 thereabout, but it's before 2000. But from 2000 onwards, because in 2001 I was in Boko, and then I saw that Boko was a pale shadow of itself, and till date it is still running. Where do we have to look at governmental intervention or traditional intervention to be able to find a solution?
Yes. So recently I heard that Asantehene is being engaged to mediate between the two factions, because if Supreme Court ruling did not stop the conflict, then the legal process has been exhausted. So now you need more political solution, and the political situation here is traditional politics. So you need a traditional leader to lead it. Looking at the role that Asantehene played in the Dagon crisis.
The Dagon crisis.
Yes, then it means that some experience can be transposed or can be sent to this one too. So that is one. Two, the new president went there himself, something that has been rare in recent occasions. He went to Boko and met with them and spoke with them. But after that, things are getting worse. So what I think is that the president's commitment is good, and he should continue like that to engage them. Things are going to get, because there's always the political undertone. I don't want to say the opposition is backing anybody or anything. I don't want to say that. But there's always a political undertone, and that has happened over decades. So I think that the president should build confidence with all the factions and see where we go. The danger, however, is that Boko is located on the northern fringes of the country.
Yeah.
And we have extremists in Burkina Faso. Extremists who claim that they can enter into any conflict because if that conflict involves Muslims. The JNIM, group of militants who are affiliated with Al-Qaeda, hold that anything that any Muslim who suffers violence from anywhere is a victim, and so they will step in. That is the ideology, and that is important. So we should not create a situation where these people who are uninvited will invite themselves into the conflict to support one side. And in conflict, when you are frustrated and you get support, no matter where it is coming from, you are likely to welcome it.
Yeah,
that is the danger, and so that is my fear. So far, we have done some research. We found certain things I cannot disclose here, and they are not too comfortable. Okay, so I think that we must be more proactive and allow some political solution, traditional political solution, just like we saw in Gabon. Look, as Africans, we've had our own way of resolving crisis for centuries. So it is not always the case that we have to adopt UN processes or legal rational processes or modern processes. We can use our traditional systems or ways of resolving conflict to resolve them. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. We are very grateful to Mr. Amakye, and he is a security and a risk consultant in Accra, and he has given us a lot of education on what is happening in the Democratic Republic of Congo and its impact on the African continent. It's been great coming your way again. Another edition of MyView Show live on today's Ghana News TV, and we hope that you have enjoyed it. Stay tuned when we come back next week. We will give you another edition of a thought-provoking session of MyView Show. Until then, take good care of yourself, and Yehovah bless all of us. Good night.
The country where I come from, the truth is an irony, just like animal farm.